You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. Broadcasting from Boyd Gaming's Kansas Star Casino, just outside of Wichita, is we're on site for Bellator 139. Every week on this podcast, John and I give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll take an in-depth look at last Friday's Bellator event in St. Louis, Missouri, which generated record U.S. television viewership numbers and record worldwide controversy for the promotion. Big John and I will give you the truth about the Kimbo Slice versus Ken Shamrock main event, and also examine Daniel Weichel's near win over Bellator featherweight world champion Patricio Pitbull, both bouts that John refereed. Plus, we'll discuss the 3-year suspension given the former Bellator middleweight world champion Alexander Shlemenko by the California State Athletic Commission for performance-enhancing drugs. And we'll have a special MMA celebrity edition of Listener Questions, which Big John will answer. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. Well, it's the fight that is loved, hated, and absolutely not ignored. Kimbo Slice's first-round TKO win over Ken Shamrock in the main event of last Friday night's Bellator 138. While it produced a U.S. television audience 2.9 million people, the biggest by far in Bellator's 6-year history, it has also been the source of tremendous controversy. Numerous MMA websites, online fan forums, high-level pro fighters, and even television commentators, such as the UFC's Joe Rogan and Fox Sports 1's Katie Nolan, have accused the bout of having a planned outcome. As the referee, John, has been swept up in all of this, one website, lowkickmma.com, went so far as to claim that my broadcast partner Jimmy Smith and I were part of the conspiracy, which I'll address shortly and which I find really amusing. But first, a point of semantics. A work is a fight in which the winner is predetermined and both fighters are in on it. A fix is a fight in which the winner is predetermined and both fighters are not in on it. So, John, when people are claiming that Kimbo Slice versus Ken Shamrock was fixed, what they really mean is that they think the fight was worked. And, John, I will tell you with 100% certainty, having commentated a cage side, the bout was a shoot. It was completely legitimate, completely real.
It was completely legitimate, completely real, but people want to have things to complain about. They want to have controversy. They want to say, oh, my God, we never went to the moon. That was all done in a Hollywood studio. Oh, no, let's, it was America that took down the Twin Towers. It was, we did it. We wanted, people are idiots. All right, let's just flat say it. They're idiots. They say the stupidest things. They don't think about the reality of what's going on. And you look at the reality of that fight. You have all of these people, I'm going to give Ken Shamrock credit in certain areas, and I'm going to possibly say things that, someone might not like, but I'm going to give him credit as he's one of the greatest salesmen in the fight game. He can sell a fight better than just about anybody I've ever seen. Conor McGregor is catching up to him. He's getting good. But everyone believes everything that Ken says. They believe that he is changed and he's going to rip this guy's arms and legs off and he's going to do all these things because he said it over and over. And Ken has been the guy, no matter what anyone wants to say, when the UFC started, he was one of the guys that people really gravitated to based upon his look and the way that he actually handled defeat, because he got beat and he came out and he didn't say he was the second best fighter. He says, I'm not the second best fighter. I'm the third best fighter. And a lot of people gravitated towards that persona with him and the fact that he was humble, they thought, and the way they looked at him. The UFC, when they were trying to get things going, they brought in Ken Shamrock to fight Tito Ortiz at UFC 40. And you know what? He did a phenomenal job of selling that fight. And there was more eyes on that fight, at that time than what they'd had for quite a while. And he did a great job of helping the promotion get moving in the right direction. And then you look at what happened with, Bellator. Bellator brings him in. Why? Because he's the best fighter in the world. No, he's not. And if if you're expecting that, then you're not frickin' in reality. Let's just look at it the way it is. Ken's a 51-year-old man. And the real problem is Ken has never evolved as a fighter. He hasn't changed. He is what he is. And at 51, he's been broken down. No matter what, the ability to take punishment, to take damage is not there anymore. And he gave the best that he could give. And people expect, because they look at Ken and say, he's a submission master. No, I'm sorry, he's not. Ken is a 51-year-old version of a DOS-1 computer. All right, we're not talking about, he's not the Apple. He's not the, that iMac Pro, because that's the Marcelo Garcias out there. And those are the guys that are doing submissions that have evolved and have learned from one step to the other what's going to work and what's not. And Ken really hasn't changed what he does. And so you look at the rear naked choke that he was doing, if you want to look at it and be honest about things, it wasn't put on well. Now, he's a strong guy. He lived off of being strong. He lived off of being this good athlete that was strong, and he could crank people and they would tap. And the strength is not quite the same anymore, and the squeeze he was squeezing with his arms, but there was technical aspects. If you're looking at that choke that you go, you're not doing that right. You don't have your arms positioned right. Your lock hand is completely bad. Bring it to the back of his head. I want you to bring your hips into this choke because that's going to create pressure. And that wasn't there. And he gave room for someone to get out, and he gave it to a guy that decided, I'm going to tap. Oh, no, I don't think I'm going to. I'm going to try. I'm going to work my way through this. And Kimbo put it in his mind, I'm not going to tap. And he worked his way through it. And when Ken got hit by a sledgehammer. That hand, he actually moved into it. That right hand hit him in the forehead. It cut him down to the bone. Hey, I don't know what people want out of this fight. You got a 51-year-old and a 41-year-old. I don't know what any other way to say it. But, if I come to you, Sean, and I said, Sean, dude, I got some porn for you to watch. But it's old people, right? People are going to look at it and they're going to go, yeah, okay, let me see it. And then when they see it, they go, oh, God, and they're disgusted by it because it's two old people fucking. I'm sorry. There's no other way to look at it. And they think they expected something different when you knew what you were getting. You knew what you were getting. You're getting a 51-year-old guy against a 41-year-old guy. Normally, the 41-year-old guy is going to beat the 51-year-old guy. That's just what it is. And, to say it's a work, it's bad towards the sport. It's not true. You're trying to create controversy where there is no controversy. You had a fight. It was about a 4-minute fight, and the better man won. That's just what it is.
I think, John, a lot of people who watched Ken Shamrock in the 1990s who were fans had never grappled, had never rolled, had certainly never taken a jiu-jitsu class, never been to an MMA gym. Now, the world we live in with MMA fans, it's completely different. A lot of MMA fans have at least some grappling experience, some submission experience.
Exactly what you're talking about. Hold on, I want you to think about this. Look at this. Ken Shamrock fights Pat Smith, UFC 1. Tell me, what do you think Pat Smith knew about submissions?
And we put it in the book with Art Davey, Is This Legal? Pat Smith never even knew a heel hook existed. He didn't know how to defend it because he didn't know such a thing existed.
All right, so hold on. I want you to look at Let's take a look at a good leg lock eye. Let's take a look at a Huzamar Palhares. Okay, Huzamar is locking on heel hooks on guys that are good grapplers. They know what leg locks are. They know what a leg lock submission is, and they know how to try to defend against it. And how fast is he tapping guys out with heel hooks?
In seconds.
Oh, in seconds against someone that knows what they're doing. So now let's go back 22 years and let's look at Ken Shamrock against Pat Smith when he locks on the heel hook. Does Pat Smith immediately tap?
Yeah, he's throwing elbows at the leg.
He throws a bunch of elbows on his shin.
It's over 10, 12
seconds.
He
does these axe kicks, and he actually axe kicks him to the eye. He hits him in the eye, gives him a black eye, and the hold is on for
10, 12, 14 seconds.
What's it telling you about how good the hold is?
Not very good technique.
So is there a difference? There's a difference. And, Ken was a strong guy, and maybe that technique was never that really tight like you'll see guys today. You watch a Huzamar and you watch the way he does it. You watch someone like a Marcelo Garcia and the way they do things. Their technique is phenomenal, and they don't give space. They don't give the ability for someone to have a chance to survive. And when given the ability to survive if there's that space and you're mentally tough enough to put up with discomfort. Because no matter what, when Ken Shamrock is squeezing on your neck, with his forearm across your trachea, it hurts. It's painful. But if you're a guy that understands that, this hurts, I can live through it. Let me continue on. Let me get this hand. Let me get myself out of this bad position. And actually, that's what Kimbo ended up doing. And that's why he won the fight.
So, John, to my point that so many MMA fans now have at least some grappling or submission experience, part of, I think, the call for this as a work is because of Ken's hand going on the top of the forehead of Kimbo's slice.
Okay, what is that? That's poor technique.
It's catch wrestling technique.
Okay.
What is Ken Shamrock come out of pro wrestling and then catch wrestling in Japan? I'll tell you, in my grappling class in Kansas City, if I put my hand there, they would ask me to leave the class. And I'm nowhere near a level like you, who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But it's 1990s poor technique.
Yeah, exactly. You can watch guys, watch BJ Penn when he locked in a rear naked choke. That arm coming across the neck is one thing, but it's his locking hand, that free hand. He never, ever brought it even close to the ear level of his opponent. It never went in front of their face. It slid in behind that to lock in. That's what we're talking about, the technique of someone that doesn't give you the room to escape, doesn't give you that ability to make it past what this hold can do. And, that's just the difference in levels of guys.
So part of the work conspiracy theorists say that there was the tap, and you were somehow complicit in this.
Go ahead.
Because
you know what? Think there's a tap.
There were
blind.
Tap. Let's put that to bed right now. And people say, well, I saw it on TV. I don't think anybody was closer than you because you were the referee.
You know what? I saw what he did, okay? And here's the difference. So what was it that I told Kimbo in the back? Well, I want to hear all the people that watched it on TV. What did I say to them? What is it? Your idea of a tap is one thing, and that's great. I'm glad that's your idea of a tap. But really, it means dick. Okay? It's what I see and what I've told the guy and what I'm going to allow and what I need from him to show me that he's trying to make it through the hold. And we went through that in the back. And, Kimbo told me, I'm not going to tap. I said, great. That's awesome. But if you need to, this is what I'm going to expect. You can do it verbally. You can tell me, hey, John, I need out. Or if you're going to take it, and I want you to slap him. I want you to put those hands, hit that ground. Tell me you want out of there. I'll get you out of this fight. Slap on Ken. Slap on yourself. I don't care. But if your hand comes into this little position and I see a waiver, I'm going to wait. And I waited. And you know why I waited? Because he didn't tap. That's not what I was looking for. If he had done a tap, Fedor. It's not that your hands have to tap the ground 3 times. It's the intention of what your hand's doing. There's people saying that, he tapped on Ken. He's grabbing for his arm and his hands. If you think that his hand's tapping into his arm, that's great that you think that. That's because you want Ken Shamrock to win. I don't care if Ken Shamrock wins. I don't care if Kimbo Slice wins. I care that what is done is legal. It's fair to both fighters, and they're fighting within the rules. And Kimbo was working to get himself out of a choke. There was never a tap done by Kimbo. The other one is, he went limp. You're a moron. All right? If you think he went limp and then he woke back up, you're about as clueless as it comes. Jesus Christ, how stupid can people be? You don't get put unconscious and then come back and punch someone in the face, all right? I don't know any other way to say it. I'm looking at Kimbo. When Kimbo says, I kind of felt like I was going out, that's great. I'm sure he did feel like that. I've been there many times, but that doesn't mean that I went out. Because when I go out, I go to sleep, and it takes me several seconds to come back because my brain was shut off. That's what my body's doing as a defense system. Kimbo never got to that point. And so there's people, he even said that he went out. He didn't say that he went out. He said that he felt like he was feeling the pressure and getting dizzy. Great. I'm sure he was. That doesn't mean he went out.
And John, then there's the end of the fight, and our Spike production crew, who I think is the best in the combat sports business, showed those super slow-mo replays. Anybody who said, well, Ken took a dive, did they then immediately turn away from their television sets? If that was a work, You better not split your opponent's face open with a punch.
Well, I'm
It's
sure
ridiculous.
that
He was blasted.
Come on, I'm sure that Kimbo and Ken got together, and Ken said, "I'll tell you what, Kimbo, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go and I'm going to take you down, and you're going to get back up, and then I'm going to take you down again. And when I take you down, I'm going to take your back, and I'm going to sink in a rear naked choke, but I'm not going to do it tight enough for it to put you out. And then you're going to get up." And then you're going to hit me with a fucking sledgehammer of a right hand that cuts the fuck out of me, because that's going to really look good. That's what happened.
That's well choreographed. But seriously, John, at the end of the fight, and let's talk about what you saw. But what I saw calling it live is that he got blasted in the face, and his arms were completely spent from the rear naked choke attempt. So his arms are basically noodles at his side. Say what you will about Kimbo Slice, the man can hit hard. Forgetting all the poor technique, doesn't know how to sprawl, doesn't have good striking defense, isn't a mixed martial artist. He can throw a right hand, and he did.
He can throw a right hand. Look at, he hit Ken hard. I felt bad for Ken when he got hit by it. I mean, it blasted him. Ken was in a position that he could defend himself. I tried to give him time to see if he was going to work in that way. It was clear he was done. He was not going to get into any position to defend himself, other than where he was at. Kimbo started coming in. I stopped it because there's no point in letting Ken take unnecessary harm. But, all the people can say whatever. You can sit there and say, oh, I saw this, I saw that. This was a fight. It was a fight between two older guys. The expected result was pretty much what you saw. Ken had a chance. He lost the chance. And he got hit with a shot that hurt him to the point he couldn't fight anymore. He took damage. He got cut on both of his eyes. He got cut a little bit on his right eye. The cut over his left eye was right to his skull. It was deep. It was a serious cut. No one sits there and says, I'm just going to let you just blast me and cut me open for a good work. Okay? It's just stupid.
The work conspiracy theorists also talked about the easiness of the single leg takedown by Ken Shamrock, to which I would answer, have you never seen Kimbo Slice fight? This isn't exactly Ben Askren here. I don't think Kimbo Slice, an American Top Team, is doing a lot of sprawling drills. Well, and if he did, he forgot
Let's take a look at all the incredible grapplers that Kimbo has fought. All right, let's see. We've got Bo Cantrell was a fight that he did in Elite XC. Bo is known for his grappling prowess, okay? No. He fought Tank Abbott. Now, Tank, that's a guy that he was big into submissions. No, okay, maybe not. Didn't go there. James Thompson, that's a guy that, never mind, I'm sorry. That's not a grappler either. He fights Seth Petrozelli. That one goes 14 seconds, so we didn't even get, Seth can grapple, but we didn't get there, so no grappling in that. He fights Roy Nelson in The Ultimate Fighter, and what happened? Roy takes him down, Roy crucifixes him, and just starts to pound on his head until the referee stops the fight.
And he had zero answer to Kimbo Slice.
He doesn't know how to stop a grappler from taking him down. All right, so we go out of that. He loses that fight. Now we'll go on to, he fights Houston Alexander, another guy known for, doesn't grapple at all, just likes to stand and throw bombs or knees. And it was a horrible fight. But then he gets Matt Mitrione, who we know is, he likes to stand and fight too. I mean, come on, let's be honest. Let's look at matchmakers are not stupid in this sport. And they say, look at, Kimbo is somebody that people like to put their eyes on. They're interested in him. He has a personality. There's people that are gravitating towards him just because of the way he looks, his street fighting creds that came with the YouTube sensation, all that. And so the matchmaker's not going to try to get someone to beat the hell out of him by taking him on the ground and choking him out. They're going to try to put somebody in there that is going to stand with him and throw hands, because that's where Kimbo at least has a chance to possibly win the fight.
Yeah, note he wasn't fighting Bobby Lashley on this card.
Exactly. When they put Kimbo against Bobby, they're both heavyweights. They both weigh close to the same amount. When they put Kimbo against Bobby, they're telling you, we want to get rid of Kimbo because he can't stop anything Bobby would do. All right? And that's just the way it is. Fighting is about styles. And when you have somebody like Kimbo, you realize there's people that like to watch him. There's people that want to put their eyeballs on him. That's going to bring you ratings. You use him to help bring eyeballs to your other fighters. Okay? That's what they're doing. That's what they did with Kimbo and Ken. You had Patricio Pitbull Ferrer fighting against Daniel Weichel. The reason that they're not the main event, even though it's a championship fight, is they want people to watch that fight. So they're waiting for this Kimbo fight because they know Kimbo and Ken are the ones that are going to bring the eyeballs. And they did it, 2.9 million. There was more people that saw Patricio Ferrer fight last Friday night in one night than probably all of his fights on Bellator combined. It did exactly what it was supposed to do.
John, we'll talk about the accusations of this being a freak show and the integrity of Bellator, the integrity of MMA. But let me give you a final point on the fact that people claim this was a work. This is my favorite.
Oh, God.
So I was in on this, apparently. So the website lowkickmma.com, they had an article.
If you were in on it, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah, I know. Well, I wanted to keep it suppressed. So I'm quoting now. Note how the commentators are calling the action spot on, almost as though it was from a playbook. I think that's the greatest backhanded compliment I've ever received.
Dude, that's a great compliment. That means you really know what you're doing.
Isn't that awesome?
Dude, you're good.
Actually, I had it scripted out. Sloppy single leg, poor form, rear naked choke.
The best part about that is, I'm going completely off subject really with it, but it just goes to show you that you and Jimmy Smith are good at your job.
I appreciate that.
And you guys do a great job, and you know exactly what you're looking at. You're honest about things as far as how well they are, how well the technique is done, how well it was done completely, and you guys speak the truth about it. And so you're gonna say exactly what went on. And if someone thinks that's part of the work, congratulations. I have some incredible beachfront property in Kansas. Why don't you come get it?
I appreciate that. It makes me think, too, of Ken Shamrock. In my book with Art Davey, Is This Legal? When Art is recruiting Ken Shamrock, they're speaking on the phone. And Ken was doing straight pro wrestling in Japan, strong style. Yep. And then sort of that gray area with the early pancreas and sort of, was it a shoot? It kind of going back and forth.
Look, at the problem with Ken is, let's be honest. Ken has had work fights.
A lot of work fights.
Okay, he's had work fights. There's no doubt about it. I can name them. Okay?
Bart Vale is one.
Oh, Bart Vale was one. Even in Pancrase, dude, he threw the title to Suzuki. They wanted him to give the title. He did. He lost to Funaki on purpose. There's those fights out there. Yes, he threw. He didn't throw this one, dude. If he could have won this, he'd have given anything to win this.
Yeah, in the book, so Art is recruiting Ken over the phone, and he said, now, what is it you're doing in Japan? And he said, well, it's mostly real. And Art said, well, this is all real in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. That was all real in Bellator. There's no doubt about it. Well, the bigger issue, and I think hopefully now we finally put to bed definitively.
Oh, no, someone will say,
we're in on it. They got to us, John. Yeah. They got to us on the work. But a lot of people are saying the freak show element, the integrity of Bellator, the integrity of the sport. Look, I'm an MMA purist. I think these fights are great for Bellator, great for the sport. Look at the interest that we created beyond the hardcore fan base. Again, 2.9 million viewers in the U.S., all of the all-time Bellator record, the second highest viewed MMA broadcast on U.S. cable television, beat every UFC but the McGregor-Seaver fight on Fox Sports 1. I knew that something was up when the woman cutting my hair the week before I left for St. Louis was asking me about the fight. She's cut my hair for 4 years. She's never once asked me about MMA. She was like, yeah, my husband and I are really excited about this Kimbo Slice fight. I knew the ratings were going to be huge. They were huge. People who were offended, I would say, turn the fight off after Pitbull versus Weichel, and then you don't have to watch it. Enjoy the rest of the card. It wasn't a freak show card. It was a great card, and it had that type of fight. If you're offended, don't watch that fight.
Dude, take a look at who they had. The Michael Chandler fight. Michael looked fantastic in that fight. You go to Daniel Strauss against Henry Corrales. That was a great fight and really an impressive performance by Daniel Strauss because a lot of people don't know who Henry Corrales is. Henry is a good, tough fighter who hits like a truck, and Daniel really walked through him. He did a great job in that fight. The Pitbull versus Weichel fight was great. You can look at the Bobby Lashley versus, Dan Charles fight. It was almost predictable in that Bobby is so athletically gifted and such a good, wrestler and can hold position that it's tough for a guy like Dan Charles to get himself away from Bobby. So that one was kind of predictable, but, the Weichel Ferrer fight, unbelievable. Comeback of the year, no doubt about it, with what happened. It's just, it's sad that people have to, try to get into, this stuff. I can tell you what works, and look at in the UFC. Has there ever been a work? Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, but not by the promoter. Never by the promoter. But there was times when Oleg Tatarov fought Anthony Macias, UFC 6. Anthony Macias threw the fight.
You refereed it.
Refereed it. Now, and right away, I said that you threw that fight. Knew it right away. When Don Fry fought Mark Hall the second time, not the first time.
The world's jankiest leg lock.
Oh, the worst leg lock ever. And he taps to it. I'm like, that's a fake fight. They set that up. Now, just so happened you ended up having the same manager for both fighters as they're going in. The UFC never had anything to do with it. The management of it, the people who own it, they didn't want that to happen. It was set up outside of it by people that had no morals. I was in there with Kimbo and Ken. It was real. It was a fight. It was a fight between some older guys, but there was nothing as far as the work going on.
So to the people who are criticizing the fight, not even questioning shooter work, but saying the freak show element, let's go back to the Art Davie era of the UFC. UFC 3, you refereed it, Keith Hackney versus Emmanuel Yarborough. Mm-hmm. That was a fun fight. People
No, it was a horrible fight.
It was a
broke my heart. It broke my heart to watch a guy who just couldn't even get himself up off of the ground. He's trying to push himself off the ground. Keith Hackney is sitting there hitting him. And I was asking, let me get you out, man. You had enough. Come on, man. Do something. And he said, finally, he goes, I think I've gone enough. Stop the fight.
Did anybody say, that Emmanuel Yarborough Keith Hackney fight ruined UFC 3? No, nobody said they loved it. Last week on our program, we had Scott Coker, the Bellator president, on. He was talking about trying to recreate what they did in Pride. So Pride Shockwave 2004, one of the greatest MMA cards ever. Saitama Super Arena, crowd of 48,400 in attendance. So listen to this card. Fedor Emelianenko versus Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Mark Hunt versus Wanderlei Silva. Dan Henderson versus Yuki
That was the
Kondo.
butt stomp.
That was. Mirko Krokop versus Kevin Randleman. Ryo Chonin versus Anderson Silva. Takanori Gomi versus Jens Pulver. Listen to what else was on that card. Makoto Takimoto, who is a welterweight, against Professor Henry Miller, who outweighed Takimoto by at least
Henry
140
Miller was an
pounds.
ex-sumo.
At least he was 300, 320.
Yeah.
6'3" Mube Choi versus 7'2" Giant Silva. Yeah. And Rulon Gardner in his one and only MMA bout versus Hidehiko Yoshida. I don't recall anybody ever being mad at any of those so-called freak show fights.
No, that was Pride. It was awesome.
That was the spice of Pride. You had some of the best fighters in the world, and you had some freak show fights, and nobody got mad. So why are people now getting mad, I ask rhetorically, in Bellator?
It's, you know what? It's a matter of people have been programmed by what they're given. And the UFC is set up where, the UFC is brutal on fighters. As far as, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying it, if you're a fighter in the UFC, you don't get any easy fights. They, Joe Silva, Sean Shelby are the matchmakers for it. Man, it's a murderer's row that you're being put through. And they don't have those real fun fights that are, hey, let's do this one. This would just be fun to do.
The last one was Tony and Couture. Let's be honest.
Exactly. You're looking at the occasional freak show. James Toney, I know James very well. He's a friend of mine. He went and he talked himself into a fight. He pressured or pestered Dana White enough that Dana finally said, all right, I'm going to shut you up. And he puts him against, and you got to look and who he puts him against. He's smart because he's saying, well, James Toney's an old boxer. I can't put him against a young kid. I can't do that. I'll put him against an old MMA fighter. But when I put him against the old MMA fighter, it's going to be a guy that I know is going to take him down and just beat on him and make him to where he realizes I can't fight with these guys. And he puts him against Randy Couture, and Randy does it. Randy, I don't know how many times I've talked about it, pulls out a takedown that we do not even teach in MMA because it will put you in a bad position against a good MMA fighter. He pulls it out against James Toney because he has no idea how to stop a low single with a tuck of the heel and a push of the shoulder into the knee, and he goes down. And as soon as Randy did it, I went, oh my God, that was genius. That's the dumbest takedown ever, and it was genius. And it was. This is Randy Couture being a smart fighter going against a guy that has one element, that stand-up element. James Toney's going to beat the snot out of Randy on his feet. But you look at what he did, that's a freak show fight. But no one complained about it because it went the way they thought it was going to go. Everyone thought, Randy's going to beat him. Randy's going to beat him. And he did. And the UFC, for the most part, doesn't get into the giant Silvas versus, the thing. But, there's fights on that card where you look at, yes, you had Fedor against Nogueira, but you had Randleman against Krokop. And at that time, Krokop was the beast. He was the guy knocking everybody out. You had Vanderlei Silva against Mark Hunt. There, everyone's going, well, why are they putting the big, Mark Hunt against Vanderlei? But Vanderlei was up in the 230-pound range at that time. But the fight that no one wanted to see was Randleman against Krokop, because everyone said Randleman's past, he's not fighting. Randleman knocked Krokop senseless in that fight. Huge win, did that giant gorilla frickin' Mongolian gorilla chop on him afterwards and stuff. That's the difference between the Japanese style of promoting and the American style, which the American style is from the UFC. The UFC is all about matching, number ones against number twos, number threes against number fours, number sixes against number eights. They're big into, that pyramid towards the championship. And that's a great, way of looking at it. It's really the American way of doing things. We're all about who's the best, who's number one, who's the big guy. Where Bellator is doing that, but they're also trying to do fun fights. This is what Coker talked about when we talked with him on our last, podcast is, I want to do fun fights. I want fights that people go, I want to see that. I just want to put my eyes on that. And it doesn't have to have any meaning within rankings or anything like that. That's what we're going to do. So he's telling you, I'm going to put on the Ferrer against the Weichels. I'm going to put on the fights where I put Eddie Alvarez against Mike Chandler, or Will Brooks against Mike Chandler now, or whatever's going to come. I'm going to do the fights where I'm putting number one against number two. But I'm also going to do the fights where it has no meaning. It's just a fun fight, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Every week on Let's Get It On, we bring you our poll question. You can cast your vote on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. So here we go with this week's poll question. I know you feel strongly one way or the other, passion flowing in both directions. Did you approve of the Kimbo Slice versus Ken Shamrock fight being included on a Bellator card? Let your voice be heard. Vote yes or no on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, my vote is the commentator. I like those fights. If it was an entire night of freak shows, that's something different. But it wasn't. It was a really outstanding card, including the undercard. A lot of tough prospects in that card. And then, again, if you don't like it, turn it off. I don't think anybody turned it off. I think a lot of people turned it on. The Nielsen ratings in the U.S. measure in 15-minute increments. What do you think happened in the 15 minutes when that fight started, Kimbo versus Shamrock? It exploded in viewership.
People have to realize why Bellator puts that fight on, and we've talked about it here, and they want you to see the other talent. They want you to tune in for that fight, but their whole purpose is for you to see their other talent, the talent of young fighters that they have. So you start to see them fight, you go, oh my God, I really like that guy. Wow, that guy's really good. And you want to see him again, which means you're going to tune in for the next time that guy's got a fight. That's what we're looking for.
As a final point on all of this, if you want to see what an MMA work looks like that was sold as a shoot to the public, three-time Olympic Greco wrestling gold medalist Alexander Curran, probably the greatest Greco-Roman wrestler of all time. You know where I'm going, yes. Versus pro wrestling legend Akira Maeda. It was in Japan in the Rings promotion in 1999. Watch it. It's actually on SureDog.
Watch it and learn.
Shoot. That is what an MMA work absolutely looks like. I think they still deny it, but there is no way that was not a work. So hopefully now put the issue to bed.
This is a story for you. Maeda, he loves me. He thinks I'm a great guy because he actually gave me gifts and stuff. He got attacked by Yoji Anjo in the backstage at Japan, and I went and kind of pulled people off of him and stuff.
Is that a euphemism for throwing elbows in the skull?
He got kind of cut up and everything, but I got him out of that mess, and he's a very nice man. He's just not a fighter. Sorry.
Still to come on this week's episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer listener questions this week asked by MMA fighters. Plus, we'll break down Big John's actions as the referee from last Friday night's co-main event at Bellator 138, Daniel Weichel versus Patricio Pitbull, and we'll discuss the 3-year suspension issued to Alexander Shlemenko for performance-enhancing drugs. Coming to you this week from Boyd Gaming's Kansas Star Casino with John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock, and you are listening to Let's Get It On. It's the book that Wrestling Observer calls a must-read for any MMA fan. Jonathan Snowden of Bleacher Report describes as riveting and amazing, and TheFightNerd.com says nothing is held back. Pick this book up right away. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, written by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by John McCarthy, is now available to listeners of this podcast at the special price of $12.48. That's far less than you'll pay for the book on Amazon and half price of what you'll pay in store at Barnes & Noble. Buy it directly from the publisher now online at ascendbooks.com and enter the promo code LEGAL50. That's ASCEND books.com, promo code LEGAL50. Learn the true story of how the UFC came into existence in the book that Randy Couture describes as honest, shocking, and enthralling, and that has a rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars from Amazon Reader Reviews. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by Big John McCarthy. Available now online at ascendbooks.com for just $12.48 when you use the promo code LEGAL50. Hey, this is Sean Wheelock.
And this is Big John McCarthy.
If you're a fan of our show, then you're going to love the rest of the Ignotainment podcast lineup.
Like the Ocho Man behind the 8 Ball and the Whiskey Philosopher with Jeff Cooper.
You can find these great podcasts and more at ignotainment.com. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the program.
Let's get it on!
When looking for new and exciting clothing concepts, look no further than Lambs to Lions. Lambs to Lions has great designs that incorporates the past from boxing with the new and exciting evolution of MMA. We all start out as lambs, but with time, training, and hard work, we can all become lions. Be part of the Lambs to Lions movement and check out all of their great designs. You can get your Lambs to Lions gear at the Las Vegas Fight Shop or go to lambstolionsbrand.com.
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Every week on this podcast, Big John and I answer your question away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. And of course, please include a pronunciation guide for your name. On this episode of the program, we have a special MMA celebrity edition of Listener Questions.
Big John, this is Bobby Lashley. Hey, my question is, what do you score, as far as scoring, a takedown compared to striking equivalent? What would be the equivalent of a takedown for striking? Is it a kick, a punch, a jab, a hard 2 overhand, or does it matter how hard you slam the person down? That's my biggest question, how they score as far as the judges.
You know, Bobby, that's a great question. We have a lot of people that do not understand how judges are looking at takedowns, and there's a variety of takedowns, and there's a different way that judges are going to be looking at all those takedowns. We look at when we're teaching judging or anything like that, we talk about what we call amplitude. Amplitude for me it's the elevation of someone being picked up, and it's how much energy you bring them down and slam them down onto that mat with. And it's the position sometimes that you'll end up with depending upon how you brought them down. So if you end up picking somebody up, elevate them up in the air, and then you try to bring them down and it ends up not being a slam, you elevated them, but you didn't get that amplitude, you didn't get that impact. And so the judge is going to say, well, it's a takedown. What position do you come out with? Do you end up in side control where you're going to get more credit for your takedown? Do you end up in their guard? You're going to get a little bit less credit for your takedown. What do you do with the position once you take the fighter down? That's what they're looking at it. Are you just holding on, or are you going after trying to break your opponent? You're trying to damage your opponent and do things to him. So the type of takedown is, when it's a technical takedown, we'll say you do something like you do a haragoshi, and you have someone who gets a position, he gets an overhook, but still
boom, he hits that Haragoshin, that leg sweeps through, and you have this elevation of the opponent is going through the air, he's rotating, and as he's coming down, you're coming down with your weight down on top of him in that throw. You impact the ground. The judge is going to give you high credit for that type of takedown. That's going to be, like what you're saying. You're landing a combination with a heavy 2 being landed. That's what the judge is going to give you for that type of takedown because there's impact with it. What you're looking for is that along with the positioning that you end up in, and then they're still going to kind of just let it run out as far as what they're doing with what you end up doing with it. If you end up taking that and trying to slow the fight down, they're saying, well, you got it there. It's a position change. I'm not going to give you a lot with it if there was no impact. If you take the fight to the ground even with no impact, but you go after your opponent, you start landing big shots, they're going to give you a lot more credit for that takedown that you did because of what you did with it and you trying to damage her.
Hey, Big John, it's Jeff Curran. I had a question for you. Either you could answer it or maybe it's an opinion, but a couple years ago you reffed a 5-round title fight between me and Pedro Munoz at the RFA on an outdoor show. And by the time I had stepped into the cage for the main event, neither of us could barely stand up. The marine layer had settled in. It was a vinyl canvas, and we were slipping all over the place. Neither of us fought to our potential, even though it made an exciting fight. My question to you, I guess, is, as an official, who at that point can determine whether or not that fight should or should not be canceled or called off, or until the floor is addressed? Because I've done outdoor shows as well in the past, and fighters are slipping over all over the place, and the canvas is hard to maintain. Who controls that? Should the athletic commission, or could a referee or an official override and call the show?
Another really good question, Jeff. I remember that fight very well. That was done at the StubHub Arena, which is in Carson, Dominguez Hills, California, which is right by the beach. And, when you have an open air arena or a show done outside, especially down by the beach, you get that inversion layer, it rolls in, and the canvas is going to, if that surface was a canvas itself, it would have been no problem. The problem was the surface was a vinyl floor, the vinyl being slippery, especially when it gets wet, and you guys were slipping and sliding all over the place. The real question is, what can we do with it? Well, we try to take towels and wipe, and if you go back and you watch that show, you'll see that we were wiping down the entire surface of the flooring after every round. And they could dry it off fairly well, but by a minute and a half into the round, it's back to being wet, and you guys are slipping around. What we did do, even in that fight, is we go to the commission table and we tell them, hey, look, these guys are sliding all around. And the commission's the one that's going to determine, you know what, we think that it is too much as far as there's too much water. These guys are not able to compete. We're going to call the fight, and they can call the fight depending upon what round they called that fight in. They can go to a technical decision, and that was a 5-round championship fight. So if it had gone into the 4th round when they called it, they could have gone to the scorecards and actually had the judging of the first 3.5 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever it is, and actually come up with a winner. If they had stopped it before then, the fight would have ended as a no contest. And it really comes down to the commission as the call. The referee gives their opinion, says, look at these guys, they're sliding around in here. This is a safe environment for them fighting. It should be that the commission is looking at the safety of are they going to hurt themselves in a way based upon their inability to hold their footing or be able to balance themselves off of a wet deck. And that was a hard one. You had RFA is the show that was. It was one of their first shows. It was their second big show that they had. It meant a lot to them, and so I think the commission there was trying to push that and let it go as far as they could. Fighting actually an incredible fight, a lot of action, but the ground action you guys would just start. It ended up being a lot more stand up than I think even you wanted, based upon what you were given as far as the elements. And so it really comes down to the commission. The commission is the one that needs to call the fight, but it wasn't done in that instance.
Big John, this is James Krause. think I more wanted to comment on the linear kick straight to the knee, like on top of the knee. What are your thoughts on that? I hate it as a fighter because I really don't see the purpose in it too much. I think it does more harm than good. It causes injury to guys. You've seen, I think Miguel Torres in his last fight out blew his knee out doing that. It just doesn't seem like it's a very technical move that it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. It's a straight stomp right to the kneecap. Was it effective? Absolutely, but I don't really see the skill involved in that. So it's just kind of something that I'm not big on.
Wow, another good question. One that has got you're either black or white on it. I know guys on both sides of it. There are guys that hate a linear kick to the knee. They think it's the dirtiest move in the world. They think it should be banned, it should not be allowed. And there's people that, I'm on that side of the other one saying, we allow you guys to get punched, kicked to the face and head. And to sit there and say that I'm not going to allow a linear knee strike because I'm worried about that being the injury, we've allowed that for a long time, and we really had hardly any injuries off of it. The whole issue was reviewed by the Association of Boxing Commissions, the MMA Committee on Rules and Regulations, reviewed that back in 2010 and came up with their assessment that nothing should be done. They went and talked to a multitude of fighters, trainers, went through records to find out about injuries based upon it, because there was people trying to get it put into the unified rules as a foul. And after reviewing and going over everything, they came up with they were going to let the thing stay. It was a legal technique. And at this point, unified rules, linear knee strikes all. There are certain states that actually disallow it, but the linear kick legal. Now, I'll tell you, there's plenty of unified rules that I think are silly. Heel kicks to the kidney, the 12-6 elbow, the downward elbow strike. All that should be changed, and the ABC should be looking to change the rules, or at least review the rules every year to make our sport better. And so that rule, as far as the linear knee kick, it could come up in the future again, be reviewed again, and they may change it. But at this point, as of 2010, that is a legal maneuver.
Our thanks to Bobby Lashley, Jeff Curran, and James Krause for those outstanding questions. And remember, email us your questions, anything that you'd like to ask Big John, info@letitonpodcast.com. John and I are with you this week from Boy Gaming's Kansas Star Casino, just outside of Wichita, on site for Bellator 139, which John will be serving as one of the referees, and I'll be commentating with Jimmy Smith. Last Friday night, of course, Big John, we're doing our roles in St. Louis, Missouri at Bellator 138. John lost a bit in all of the reaction to the Kimbo Slice versus Ken Shamrock main event was the fact that Patricio Pitbull recorded an amazing come-from-behind win for Daniel Weichel to retain the Bellator featherweight world title in the night's co-main event.
That was an awesome fight between two really highly skilled guys. You gotta love Pitbull. He is so tough. He's been in his last two title defenses. He's been in trouble in both of them. And, man, he works his way out, and he stays busy, and he goes after his opponent, and he hits like a truck. For a 145-pound fighter, that dude's got heavy hands, and that's what gets him out of trouble at times, is he can connect with that one shot that changes the whole fight. If you look at the beginning of it, I thought, Ferrer was doing a really good job. He was moving well. He was landing the good shots. Weichel was having a little bit of trouble at about 2.5 minutes into that first round. Weichel started to understand the range, and he's become a lot more proficient with what he was doing. He was starting to land good shots. And then that last, we'll say 15 seconds, I'm not sure exactly what the time was, he lands a big shot that hurts Ferrer. Ferrer kind of drops down, then is rising back up. Weichel goes after him. He lands a beautiful knee on him. The knee drops him, and he lands one more shot, and it's the end of the round. And, I heard the 10-second marker telling there's 10 seconds left, and you'll notice that I always point towards my timekeeper. When that happens, I point in that direction to let the timekeeper know that I heard it, because now I know exactly how much time is left. And it's the only time that I will actually count in my head. I'll start counting backwards, so I know when I need to get close to the fighters to come in so I can get in between them so there's no late blows or anything like that. And I came in to stop the round. I did.
I didn't realize I could hear the bell, but I didn't realize other people couldn't.
I couldn't hear it
because the crowd got really loud because of the action that was happening, and it's happened before. And that's how I learned, about pointing to the timekeeper. It's something we came up with based upon that. Will always, at least I'll know when the round should end. So if I get to 2, 1, 0, I'm going to stop that round because I know it's loud. Should have been able to hear the bell. I'm not able to hear it because of the rise of the noise of the audience, and I'm going to come in and stop that round. So the round ended. Pitbull was still able to, hold himself. You watch when that round comes to an end. I move Weichel off. If the fight was over, you'd see me taking my hands, and I'm going to be waving my hands over my head. That's the signal that the fight's over.
And see, I was for that as the commentator, and what people hear on television isn't necessarily what Jimmy Smith and I are hearing in our headsets. And it was so loud. And David Rickles and Joe Wilk were seated maybe 5 feet behind us in the front row position. They couldn't hear the bell either. I noticed that you didn't wave your hand. Then Weichel, legitimately, he won. He's not trying to sell anything.
No.
So he's reacting. But there was
all he knows is that I've pushed away from Ferrer.
There's a weird moment in the crowd where they're not quite sure. You were sure, and that's really all that matters.
That's all that matters. Well, what made me understand that people didn't realize this is just the end of the round is our cage guys are there, and they're told at the end of a fight, do not let the corners come running in or anything like that. We want to get a doctor in, so they're going to let the doctor come in. Well, the doctor's sitting there because he knows it's not the end of the round, but the cage guy's thinking it's the end of the fight. He's not letting anybody in, and I'm trying to watch Patricio Ferrer. I want to watch his movement. I want to see how he's reacting because it's going to give me a read on, am I going to let him continue on in the fight, or how is he going to be for this next round? So I'm kind of watching him, and then I realized that the gate's not opening up, and I'm looking. I said, open up the gate, let him come in. He goes, it's not the end of the right? And so then I ended up moving off of it, but it was it's close. What you need to do is when you're looking at, as a referee, I'm looking at the type of knockdowns there are. And obviously in this fight, we had a couple of different types. And this is what, tells us what we're doing. When when I'm teaching officials, I tell them there's 5 different types of knockdowns. All right. When you're looking at the first type of knockdown, it's what happened with Pitbull. Pitbull gets hit with a shot and he's going down, but you see his hands going down to support his actual fall to the ground. And then he hits it and he pops right back up. But his hands are going down, so it's telling me as the referee or any referee that's in there, it's telling us his brain is still working. Yes, he got hit with a shot. It hurt him, but his brain's working. That's what I want to see. He's in a position to defend himself. He then goes and the same thing happens again. And he gets knocked to the ground, his hand hits the ground, but he's trying to come up, and that's the end of the round. Then you go to the second round. Ferrer he's still a little bit wobbly even as he comes out for the second round. He's biting he's actually running the, cage, trying to keep distance and get some more time for his brain to, get all that fuzz out. And Weichel's kind of going after him. When Weichel gets hit with the left hook, it disconnects him. And you can see that in the fact that when he is falling backwards, this is our second kind of knockdown. His hands are not going back to brace that fall. His hands are actually out front or to the sides of him as he's falling down because he's been shut off. And when he hits, he hits with his body and his head then hits off of the canvas. I let Ferrer, his hands are still to the side. I let Ferrer come down. He really misses with the next one, but it's enough to kind of jolt him a little bit, but he's still not in a position to defend himself, and that's why I decided to stop the fight. So there's a big difference between what type of knockdowns we have. We'll then get into knockdowns where guys are going sideways, or if a guy's falling forward, or if a guy implodes upon himself. Those are different types of knockdowns. And that's what good referees are reading to decide if they're going to jump in right away and stop this fight, or if they're going to try to give this guy time to recover from what happened.
On the sequence that ended round 1, when Weichel clearly has the advantage, if that's not the closing stages of the round, let's say that's midway through the round, how many seconds do you think that Weichel was away from winning that fight?
I honestly tell you he's about 5 seconds away from winning that fight. And that can vary. It really depends upon how much he decides to just calm himself down and pick good shots to just pull him away, because Ferrer's hurt. He can't move the way he normally moves. He can't react because he's been diminished. And Weichel needs to all he needs is one more shot to make this to where Ferrer is out and can't defend himself. But I didn't think that he was that far away from that moment. I would have said, if the fight had gone 5 more seconds, if that round had been 5 seconds longer, we might have had a different champion that night.
You did something at the end of round 1, which I think was lost on just about everybody, except for referees who were watching and people officiating nerds, myself included. You stayed with Patricio Pitbull. And the reason was you were not going to allow his corner to drag him back. You wanted to see him go back to his corner under his own power.
What he does when he walks tells me a lot. And this is, if you watch old boxing, they used to have a guy, he'd get hit with a drop the shot, saved by the bell would ring, and his men would come in, and this guy's face down on the floor, and they would grab him, pick him up, drag him over, flop him onto a stool, start throwing water on him. We don't allow that anymore. It's not what we're looking for. I'm not going to allow Pitbull's handlers to grab a hold and control him and bring him back to that. I want him to walk himself back, because that's all information I'm going to use on what am I going to do with this fight.
John, is the postscript to this story, and I think it really shows why you are who you are in your character. So after the fights, there's a VIP party at Scott Trade Center for Spike. I'm with you and your wife, Elaine. We all go back to the hotel together. We're about to get on the elevator. Who do we run into? There's Daniel Weichel, and you handled yourself with such class. He felt terrible, and you made him feel a lot better from that exchange.
Can you imagine how he feels? And and he's looking at it like, you didn't stop it. When I had him, I thought I won that fight, and then you didn't give me the extra chance. Is really what he's looking at, and it's not what he said to me, but I know what he's thinking, and he's like, I was that close to being the world champion. I was one punch away. It was a couple of seconds more, and it was mine, and slipped through my fingers. You've got to feel for anybody that was that close to reaching their goal, to attaining the highest level that they can attain of where they're at, and it slips through their hands. If you don't feel for that guy, you got no compassion for anything, because that's heartbreaking.
Well, on Wednesday, the California State Commission announced that it has suspended former Bellator middleweight world champion Alexander Shlemenko for 3 years and fined him $10,000 for testing positive for the steroid oxandrolone and having a reported testosterone to epitestosterone ratio of 50-1. Now, to put that figure in perspective, the California State Athletic Commission allows a maximum ratio of 4-1. In 2006, Floyd Landis was stripped of his Tour de France title for an 11-1 ratio of testosterone to epitestosterone. Again, John, Shlemenko popped at 50-1.
Yeah, I think he took it just before the I don't know what he did. It's a sad situation. It really is, because we have a guy that wants to, get to a point in his career. Shlemenko has done an incredible job of having a great career. He was the Bellator champion. He lost the championship to Halsey, and that's, understandable. And then his comeback fight, he fights against a tough dude in Milovan Manhoef. It's a great striker, and he fights a great fight, knocks out Milovan Manhoef. And then when you hear that he has a ratio of 50-1, you're going, come on, are you kidding me? What are you doing? And the biggest thing was, he was advised of it. He claimed, I didn't do anything. They told him, look, you know what? This is, the testing is verifiable. You know what you've been doing. Now, this was before California changed their legislation, so they were going to give him the ability to just take a suspension of, I think it was $2,500 fine and a 1-year suspension from the date of the fight, which means that he probably had 9 months left on suspension. And he said, nope, I'm fighting this. He did. He brings a lawyer to fight it. And they basically, the lab is, you're talking about, one of the best labs in the world at UCLA. They won't take these tests if there's anything wrong with it. They won't, if they do something wrong, they're going to get rid of it. It's everything is on the up and up. You know, when people think, oh, there's some kind of conspiracy, the lab technicians have no idea whose urine it is. All they have is they have numbers, and they're given, you know, this quantity of stuff, and this one goes bing and it pops hot, and then they're told to find out what it is, and they find out what it is, find out what the ratio is, and they find out what it is, and then everyone goes, a ratio of what? 50-1? And so then they're told, hey, this one is, those numbers are matched up. The California State Athletic Commission matches it up, says that's Alexander Shlemenko's test. And from that point, you know, they retest it again, and the same thing happens. And, you know, you want to fight it? Fight it. Alexander Shlemenko got 3 years and a $10,000 fine to tell him, hey, you can say you didn't do it all you want. We know you did. And now we're going to prove to you you did. So now you can sit on the sideline for 3 years and possibly end your career, because Shlemenko's not the youngest fighter out there. And if he sticks with his, you know, contract with Bellator, that means he can't fight anywhere. And he's done. He's a done fighter. And hopefully other fighters learn from his mistake.
John, unlike Mike Richmond, who we talked about here on Let's Get It On, who publicly said through Facebook,
love what Mike Richmond did.
I was wrong. I admit it. He called himself a cheat.
How rare, a man that actually stands up and takes responsibility for his actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Shlemenko even now continues to deny it. His lawyer, Howard Jacobs, argued that a B sample wasn't collected. Basically, a B sample is, there's the urine sample. You will split the urine into an A and a B. You test the A. If the A pops, then you test the B. So that was the whole case, was, well, there was not a B sample, to which the California State Athletic Commission said, we don't care.
Exactly. Because that A sample that he gave, they have that A sample to this day. It is on, they're holding on to that thing. You need the B sample because you don't have enough of the A sample to test. They have enough. You know, that cup that he pees in, there's different levels to it and stuff. And as soon as it goes and they tape it over and he signs it, there's no way of breaking that, you know, seal without it showing it's broken. It'll break his signature, all of that. Look at, you can sit here and try to say whatever you want. I have kids, and you know, my kids used to look me in the eye and say, Daddy, I didn't do that, when I watched them do it. All right.
As a father of two young daughters, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Shocking that people would lie to us. But you know what? It just is what it is. And this is hopefully teaching other fighters, I can't do that. I've got to stop if I am. I got to figure out a way to go and feel good about myself and my training and get rehabilitated in a natural way where I'm not taking something that is going to end my career.
Alexander Shlemenko is 31. He's from Omsk, Russia, where he lives most of the time. He occasionally lives and trains in LA, but Omsk, Russia is his home. Now, he could, in theory, fight in Russia, fight in some Asian nations, some Eastern European nations. Yes. There's nothing that California, the ABC, quite frankly, Bellator can do about it. And we know that a lot of these countries that lack athletic commissions, they're going to allow someone such as Shlemenko to fight. They don't care about the circumstances.
Well, and you know, that can be, and that can happen. You know, there's all kinds of things that can be done. Bellator can always legally go after Alexander Shlemenko if he fights. They can go after the promoter that is, you know, promoting his fight. So there's legal ramifications. I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but they can do it. With the ABC and the state of California, what will happen is, as soon as Alexander decides, I'm going to take a fight, we'll say in Russia, he just sealed his fate as far as fighting anywhere in North America.
Oh, he's done.
He will never fight again in North America. No one will license him. And so, you know, his career, he can try to continue on, but it's a matter of, you know, fighters fight for money. Let's be honest. And the most money they can make. And, you know, Alexander is fighting for money. He needs to, you know, feed his little girl. He needs to take care of his family. And he's not going to get that many fights in Russia where he's making enough money to pay for his bills and to take care of his family. So he's got a choice to make. You know, he can, you know, train fighters and try to, you know, stick with his guys and, you know, work them through their careers right now and stay training and keep himself busy and try to come back the right way. or he can make the decision, I'm going to take fights in Russia and I'm going to stay in Russia for the rest of my career.
John, final point on this. With the UFC's new partnership with USADA, U.S. Anti-Doping Association, the stricter enforcement, the new guidelines, state of California, state of Nevada, we are clearly in a new era now for not just recreational drugs, but mainly performance-enhancing drugs in MMA.
Man, if you didn't take it serious before, you better now, because I'm telling you, dude, man, the hammer's fallen. People are starting to go down. That's 2 out of California within a 2-month period. And those are heavy fines. 2 years, 3 years, $10,000. They're starting to tell fighters, all right, we're done playing games. You better take us serious.
We are back with you next week for an all-new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. We'll be joined on the program by my Bellator broadcast partner, who also happens to be one of my closest friends, Jimmy Smith.
Oh, no!
And, of course, Jimmy never holds back. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, facebook.com/letsgetitonpodcast, and on Twitter @PodcastMMA for this show, and for us personally, @John McCarthy MMA and @Sean Wheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that is info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. For John McCarthy, our producer Chris Lakin, and our entire crew, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes Podcast Store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the 8 Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.